The fans have been sensational, literally the bags of letters, and I can actually say thousands of letters that we've received at our home has been very moving. And I would say probably, if one was to put a percentage on it, 90% of the letters were of please reconsider my position, my future, and please don't retire. 10%, I would say, is sympathetic to my decision and saying, yes, we feel that you've made the right decision, and because of what you've achieved in the past, we will support you whatever you choose to do. But in essence, it's put probably even more pressure on me personally than I could ever have expected. I'm saying all this, Roseanne and myself have discussed at length our future, and being very truthful today, which is the 15th of September, I'm still not totally clear what the future holds for me. I still have an unbelievable desire and love to drive cars and to race. And the opportunities now that are basically are affording me and persuading me to reconsider is quite intense and immense. And as I said, on the 15th of September 1990, I can honestly look you all in the eyes and say, I'm very confused at the moment as to what the future might hold.
The international press call him the Lion. His name to his army of fans is another word for achievement and drama. His admirers see him as one of the finest attacking drivers in the history of motorsport. His critics think of him as fiery and impetuous, capable of brutality, a risk-taker of genius. His rivals speak of him with thoughtful respect, the kind that is also faintly tinged with fear. His peers know him to be an equal, who aspires to be first. By any standard, this is a complex man, hugely talented, a self-made champion. This is the story of a quest, a tale of adventure, high risks and great reward, where courage and skill carry a man on a remarkable journey. No chapter is the same. The story, like the man, is true. He will speak freely about himself, his trials and setbacks, his skills and technique, sharing all those moments which go to make up a life. We are about to enter the world of a very private person. Only those closest to him know the struggle and pain behind the glory.
I mean, the fans in Italy have actually said that as a race car driver, I've got one of the biggest hearts in the business. And I think everybody would agree, even today, that I never get accused of not trying. I've always rationalised Formula One, really, from the day I started. And the reason I have the strength, and people say, well, where do you get the perseverance or the will or determination? And that is because I've always kept my feet firmly on the ground and I've actually said to people, you know, look, you guys, what you've got to appreciate in our game is that you're here today and you can be very much wanted, but tomorrow it can be all over. Because when you're going 200 plus miles an hour, I would say anything over 140, 150, you must have the ability or brain adaptation to slow things down. That is to say, if you're going at 200 miles an hour, the best drivers in the world are probably able to slow down the parameters, the things going past us and the corner approaching, probably to a relative speed of 40, 50 miles an hour, which sounds astonishing, but that's what a racing driver does.
Nigel Mansell is a professional racing driver. Today, Nigel is a celebrity, a household name, and the highest paid sportsman in Great Britain. He is also many other things besides. A husband and father, a businessman, a golfer of quality, an enthusiastic aviator, as well as being a special constable for his local community. Honours and trophies are his, distinctions for citizenship and charity. It could be said that Nigel Mansell has everything. Almost. Nigel Ernest James Mansell was born on the 8th of August 1953 in Worcestershire, England, above the family tea room. Nigel drove his first automobile, an Austin, in a field at the age of 7. Like many top drivers of the last 15 years, the young Nigel started his racing career in karts.
And certainly it was the junior ranks of motor racing, and you race in very close contact, and it was very exhilarating and very enjoyable.
Formula Ford provided Mansell with his first true racing car.
A little bit more commercial, more aggressive, but for me, a great struggle with again, sponsorship. But I'm saying that tremendous happiness from those 2 years I spent. We had a few races in 76 and then won the championship in 77, and really the basis of Grand Prix racing.
He also won the hand of Roseanne Elizabeth Perry, his constant companion and teenage sweetheart. Deep down for Nigel, there was another calling, the need to race and win. Driving was now an obsession, and so was the need for cash. To go up the ladder to Formula 3, the Mansell's home, car, even the family silver, was on the line.
I mean, I sacrificed the house, I sacrificed the car, I sacrificed all the small treasures that we had. Pictures, I had a couple of guns, even which people will laugh, a set of golf clubs. We sold everything we could to buy that racing car and go racing, and then up into the other formula, we actually sponsored ourselves just for 4 races, and then it was gone. You know, and you sit there, you got no house, you got no drive, all you've got is a lovely wife, and no job.
Nigel and Roseanne's relationship strained under the tension. After 7 months out of racing, including a spell of work as a window cleaner, Nigel was offered a drive with the Formula 3 team. And just when his luck would appear to have changed, another driver caused Nigel considerable grief in the form of an injured spine and a totaled car. Within days of this event came a summons from Team Lotus.
They said, could you come down next week? And I said, yes, fine, no problem. And then they said, well, we believe you've been in a bit of an accident. I said, really? No, you got the wrong person. but yes, on a serious note, I said, yeah, no problem, we'll be there the following week.
From this test, he would have his first meeting at Silverstone with the legendary Colin Chapman. Chapman was larger than life. He had made a career out of outthinking his opposition. No British constructor was so successful. Colin Chapman was also a kingmaker. His cars helped win great reputations.
I made it to the ranks of Formula 1 with the great assistance of Colin Chapman, because he gave me the leg up, he gave me the chance.
Nigel's the best British driver we've had come along in years.
But with Colin, my sheer honesty and determination, and whatever qualities he saw in me, which I don't know because I never asked him, but all I can tell you is that he not only took me under his wing, he took me under his roof. He basically made me a millionaire within the first 2 years. And what can I say about this man except everything?
After his Silverstone test, Nigel Mansell would take his place on this most famous British team. Chapman was a hard taskmaster. Mansell had to earn his respect and fight for everything within the team. Mansell would serve Lotus for 4 seasons. What an apprenticeship in Formula 1. 7 accidents, 5 engine failures, 15 ancillary failures, and no wins. But the form was there all right, as were lap times, places, and near wins.
I'm absolutely certain that you're looking at a potential world champion, and I don't think it'll be very long before we'll see Nigel consistently winning races.
With the untimely death of Colin Chapman in 1982, Mansell's fortunes looked distinctly down. His critics thought of him as brash and ill-advised. His enemies saw him as a luckless no-talent who drove over his head.
I can't believe this.
Did Nigel ever drive too quickly?
Probably in the early days when you think that you've got to go quicker than you can. That's very easy to sort of say and very hard to describe. But I think when you make it in Formula One, it's not just making it, then you have to consolidate. And I was in a situation, certainly, when I lost the great Colin Chapman, that I was in the wilderness. But fortunately, I'd already had 2.5, 3 years behind me in Formula One. But then you probably overstretch the imagination or mark a few times, and it wasn't necessary. And I mean, I'd explain it this way: basically, it's just experience and believing.
And the man who did believe was Frank Williams. Williams was an independent force in motor racing, a privateer along the lines of other British greats, Rob Walker and Ken Tyrrell.
I really paid attention to him first, I guess. I think it was Las Vegas, 1981, when he qualified very high up the grid. And I thought that was a very impressive piece of driving, because it was a hard circuit, but his car, he was probably faster than the car at that time. And I thought, we should keep an eye here. We needed another driver in the team for 1985. I'd frequently watched Nigel, obviously paying attention to his career. We talked briefly at the end of '83 about '84, but there was no opportunity. And I thought, let's talk to Nigel for '85, towards the end of '84, and thinking he's a good, tough driver, going to get on with the program, speaks English, he's one of us, if you like. We can make some good progress here, but never for a moment did I imagine that he was that good.
Williams had a bright team, a very promising engine, and on his 72nd try, a winning driver, Nigel Mansell. A first win at Brands Hatch, a second win in South Africa.
2 majestic wins, especially the Brands Hatch one. That was very special for Nigel, of course, being his first. But it became apparent to us as the season went on that the guy had outstanding talent, and going along with that was a very useful understanding of his car. But he made a big jump, if you like, over that winter. 2 wins behind him in '85 launched him into '86. And clearly he was a front runner from then on, and with Nigel, of course, and no looking back, just go forward from there.
There were many adventures in Team Williams, not the least of which was a brief introduction to the rising Brazilian star, Ayrton Senna. This was followed by more extended encounters, a breathtaking exchange where the outcome was ever in doubt. The closest race in modern Grand Prix history.
He's tucked right in behind the rear aerofoil of Lotus number 12. They come up to pass Brundle, and Mansell moves to the outside, and Mansell's going through. Nigel Mansell takes the lead and neatly boxes Ayrton Senna. Mansell can't afford to relax for one instant, because Senna's looking for every gap, and Senna's going through. Ooh, and he locks his wheels once more. But Senna's coming back for more. And Senna darting alongside, and Senna's surely done it this time, right on the grass on the inside, and Senna is through. This is a tremendous final lap as they come behind the pits, through that back section, down now under braking once more through that fast right-hand flick that leads to the tighter right-hander. Now they come down to this hairpin, and watch if Mansell closes up under braking. He does. He's right there with them. The checkered flag is waiting. It's now the dash for the line. Can Mansell get alongside? He goes one side. No, he goes on the inside, and then side by side over the line.
I tell you, I've never worked so hard in my whole career, because I had so much to do, and the car was working so well, and the engine was still working very well. I think I lost by the smallest of margins.
The vindicated Mansell would race for Team Williams for 4 seasons, and he would win again and again. There were moments when he couldn't put a foot wrong, and occasions when he was positively heroic. Brands Hatch, the site of the British Grand Prix 1986. What follows would be pure drama, Mansell style.
Splits the two Williamses. Nigel Mansell, remember, he's not in his race car. He's in a spare car which he hasn't had any time to set up. And Mansell goes through, down Pilgrim's Drop, up to Hawthorns, and Nigel Mansell goes back into second place, although now his teammate Nelson Piquet has pulled out a nice little lead. Meanwhile, the leader's going through Surtees, out of Surtees, and Piquet falters, and Mansell's through. Piquet just hesitated there. I wonder if he missed a gear. Nigel Mansell goes into the lead in the British Grand Prix. A great roar from the crowd. Nigel Mansell, the leader, in for his tyre stop. Nelson Piquet, meanwhile, going round the back of the circuit, and away he goes, 9.5 seconds. It was perhaps a second slower than Piquet's. And he comes storming out of the pit lane, and Piquet's in sight. Piquet has Philip Streff to lap as Mansell on his cold tyres goes down Paddock Hill and up to Druids. There's Piquet just coming up inside Streff, and Piquet is on Mansell's tail. Piquet with his tyres warm, his car handling well, and Mansell with his tyres still cold, and Piquet's lining up to go through on the inside, but Mansell shuts the door. Mansell shuts him out as they go through the left-hander of Surtees, and now Mansell's on his way. Once again, Piquet's close. Piquet comes up alongside as they go into paddock, but he's on the outside line, and Mansell, oh, and Piquet has another go on the inside, but there's a car to be lapped, and this time he couldn't do it going into Druids. They had a Minardi to lap, but Piquet trying one side, then the other, and Piquet is absolutely charging now into Druids. For the 75th and last time goes Nigel Mansell.
Nelson Piquet's assaults fail. Mansell's fresh tyres carry the day. This race marks the beginning of Nigel's ascent to the first rank of Grand Prix drivers. At Brands Hatch, truly, a motor racing superstar was born. 3 wise monkeys or 3 champions elect? The Australian Grand Prix would decide the world title. It was Nigel's prize. All that was required was to drive a calm race and finish third. And the World Championship crown was his. But fate thought otherwise. The title which Nigel most coveted vanished in a shower of sparks.
Self-preservation set in instantly because the car snaked, and I was doing over 200 miles an hour. I knew that my championship hopes had literally exploded. The relief of not being hurt, and then the absolute disbelief and sheer depression and exhaustion that came with knowing that I just lost the championship.
If you've been around in the pit lane for many, many years, you know that anything can happen at all times, as indeed it happened to Nigel in Adelaide in '86 when he should have won that title. But '87, we obviously looked strong, but from the word go, whilst McLaren had definitely receded in terms of performance, the new Ferrari looked good. In fact, it should have been much quicker, much earlier in the season than it was. Happily, Ferrari took a long time to sort it out, and if you perhaps remember, the last 3 or 4 races, they were definitely the quickest car on the racetrack. Happily, I repeat, that didn't happen too soon. So one was never confident or certain that Nelson or Nigel in particular would win the World Championship. But we had the best shot at it.
It was at Silverstone in 1987 that the Piquet-Mansell battle would rage to new heights. Orders from their employer, Frank Williams, were simple and direct. You may race each other. You do not take each other off the track. Sound advice. And because of that, what a contest was to occur. Piquet and Mansell were at each other's throats from the start. No quarter given, none taken. Both drivers are in matched cars. What would unfold was a classic contest. Piquet leading. Mansell could keep up, but not pass. Mid-race, he coolly came in for fresh tyres. Team Williams obliged. Piquet, meanwhile, had disappeared into the middle distance. Nigel Mansell was about to launch one of the greatest attacks of his career. The lap record fell 13 times. Once more, he was up with Piquet. 2 laps of the race remained. Nelson Piquet covered every corner, drifting wide, blocking, spoiling the corner for Mansell, as was his right. The tension was unreal. The crowd was exhausted. It could take no more. Then Mansell crouched and sprung. A maneuver so beautifully timed that Piquet had no reply other than to squeeze Mansell for all he was worth. Too late.
I mean, everybody saw the move that I made on Nelson Piquet in the 1987 Grand Prix at Silverstone, but I'd planned that for laps in advance, and I'd positioned myself in such a point that I knew exactly what he was going to do. Unfortunately, you know, he played the act out as I'd planned it. And that's why it was such a neat move, that's why it came off, and that's why it was so fabulous to win in that manner.
For Nigel, it was a famous victory. The spectators did the unthinkable in motorsport. They broke onto the course to give ovation to their driver and to cheer an all-British win. On his lap of honor, Nigel stops to kiss the ground, the very spot where he had passed Nelson Piquet. It is a gesture of high theatre. The people loved what they had seen and wanted more, and Nigel couldn't wait to give it to them. The next races were to mark a golden age in Mansell's history. His arms would strain from lifting an improbable collection of hardware. The most glittering prize of all lay ahead, the World Crown. Certain, deserved, the ultimate quest. But it would be in the land of the rising sun that the hero would meet his most terrible challenge. Practice for the Grand Prix of Japan. It was a slow corner. Dust rises from the circuit. Nigel's faithful Williams inexplicably breaks traction to spin off the course, pitching itself high onto the wall of tires, to violently smash itself down upon the curbing of the circuit. Nigel Mansell and his championship hopes were crushed. His spine sustained G-forces of huge magnitude. He would be lifted out of the car and out of the championship.
The reason it didn't look sort of too severe or whatever was the fact that the car landed the right way up, and everything looked like it was all right with the car. And in point of fact, other than the front wing, rear wing, and the side suspension, it was. But the problem was when the car landed down on the ground, it landed on a curb which was about this high above the ground. And this is sometimes how you can be a little bit unlucky. If I would have landed this side of the curb or this side of the curb, I probably would have walked away from the accident just a little bit shaken. But the curb actually hit me at the bottom of the spine, right underneath my seat. And as I think I've said earlier, my seat is about this far from the bottom of the monocoque. And they estimated I had something like about 60 G up the bottom of the spine. And of course something had to give, and I actually crushed the thoracic 12th vertebra in the middle of my spine. And with doing that, I pinched the nerves as well. And as anyone will tell you, if you pinch nerves and have a 60 G up, I'm afraid, the spine, it doesn't do you a lot of good. The whole spine was in compression. And I mean, I couldn't even breathe. That's how much pain there was.
The pits are stunned. His arch-rival Piquet shows genuine concern. Frank Williams knows his driver is alive and that Nigel Mansell is a survivor. And survive the British driver did. The following season saw him recovered, but his luck had vanished. It was tragic for himself and Team Williams. But Nigel would have rich memories of Frank Williams, the man.
Frank Williams, the man, I've got nothing but praise for the man, because what he's experienced, what he's come through, he's a monument to a human being.
And some exciting recollections of Williams Grand Prix cars.
Oh boy, I think the most powerful car I've ever driven from the point of view of horsepower was qualifying in Detroit with the Williams Honda, when we had about 1,400 horsepower, and I was wheel spinning down the straight on the qualifying lap in 6th gear. And when you're wheel spinning down the straight at 160 miles an hour and jumping over the bumps, that's quite exhilarating.
Ferrari. A new force was about to rejuvenate the British driver. Nigel Mansell was summoned by Enzo Ferrari himself. It was like being presented to the Vatican. For Nigel, it seemed true destiny to drive for Ferrari and to win the World Championship. His debut with the team was stunning. Far from losing his old fire, it was increased sevenfold. The prancing horse and Mansell were victorious. Happy with his teammate Gerhard Berger, prospects were never greater.
I mean, basically, Ferrari is the mecca of motorsport. I think there isn't a country in the world you can't go to and they don't know what a Ferrari is. And being one of their drivers is, it gives you literally pretty well world acclaim overnight. So the difference working relationship, initially working with Williams and then working with Ferrari, is sort of, literally miles apart. On saying all that, it's the same sort of problems, it's just different personnel. But then you put the language difference there as well, and then the political problems and the political pressures. Obviously, Ferrari is a tightrope, but an incredibly interesting tightrope. The intrigue there and the inside aspect of Ferrari is very, very different to any other team in racing. I have a great sense of humour. I'm a reasonably good practical joker as well, and one has to be very careful at times because there are a lot of chiefs in Ferrari. It's not like working just for Frank Williams and Patrick Head. And with Ferrari, you never know who's going to walk around the corner next, and they're all very important people. So I've employed a great strategy, certainly for the last 3 years, and that's basically just been Nigel Mansell. And if they like Nigel Mansell, then that's fine, and if they don't, then that's fine too, because I've never tried to be anything I'm not. And when I met Enzo, the mouth didn't drop open, but it felt like it had. But a statue, because his reputation preceded him enormously. And all I can say, even sitting here now, a few years on, is something that I'll remember for the rest of my life.
The aim of the team was a 2-year plan. He won 2 Grand Prix in 1989. Nigel won the hearts of the Italian people. He was second in popularity only to the Pope. The 1990 season was truly erratic for Mansell. Engines and gearboxes blew with monotonous regularity. But when the car ran, he brought more excitement to Grand Prix racing than any other British driver since Stirling Moss, whose Grand Prix record he would equal. Midsummer 1990 marked a turn in the wheel of fortune for Nigel Mansell. Scuderia Ferrari was on the podium at Mexico, first and second place. It was an occasion for being jubilant, something else Nigel is very good at. 4 days later, the champagne scarcely dried from his coveralls. Mansell was back in England testing tyres and the latest Ferrari prototype engine at his favourite track, Silverstone. Silverstone is a unique course where speed and precision are absolute. The scale of the place is huge. Some corners can be taken flat out. Mansell has described it as thrilling, challenging, exhilarating. Currently the home of the British Grand Prix, the track boasts straights where it is possible to exceed 220 miles an hour. Here, Mansell is competing in front of his home crowd. Ferrari has promised to make a special effort on his behalf.
We've got the race coming up here in a fortnight's time, and we've basically got to do a lot of homework, and we've done it on full tanks, half tanks and qualifying, and it's really to get the setup for the car to be competitive here, and it's of paramount importance. Without the tyre testing, you come here, but you'll be well off the pace. This particular test is pretty crazy. Everybody up and down the pit lane's been complaining because the test was scheduled Wednesday morning after Mexico. Well, most people didn't arrive at best until Monday night, Tuesday morning from America. And everybody's jet lagged. It's 8 hours, 7-8 hours difference from Mexico. And here we are on Friday, and I'm speaking for myself now, I'm totally bushed. I just need to go to bed to sleep now.
As usual, the ever-present pressures of the press and public continue to demand, making it altogether more remarkable that amid all the attention, Nigel takes time out to receive a private visit. You don't have to explain to a father of 3 what it means to a young cancer sufferer to sit in the driving seat of one of the world's most exclusive vehicles.
Well, the nice thing is that I'm patron of the Cancer Help Association on the Isle of Man, which I think is very, very important because, like many of us, I lost my mother 9 years ago now, and I think statistically 4 out of 6 people are getting in touch with it through their lives. And then the other charity, or not so much a charity, but the help that we give is to children's hospitals. And the one we've singled out, mainly because the businesses are down there as well, and it's nice and handy to pop and visit, as we did last Christmas, is the Pool Hospital in the children's ward. Hey? Not many people get in it. Where's your mum? She got a picture?
This is that which raises the heart and demands very special human qualities, for which words are quite inadequate.
All the best, Mum, anyway. That's it, the British Grand Prix. Eh? Don't get eaten too much. You won't get in the car, will you, eh? Okay.
No view of Nigel is complete without mention of his remarkable wife, Roseanne.
Yeah, there's no question in my mind whatsoever that without the support and belief of my wife, Roseanne, behind me, I would not have made it into Formula One.
Utterly unperturbed by her status, she packs a helicopter just as any mum might load the family car. What's it like to be a racing driver's wife?
I think it's something you just learn to live with. Outwardly, people say I don't look nervous, but I think it all goes on inside me. And especially after the race in Mexico at the weekend, I think I ended up feeling quite exhausted at the end of that. He usually comes home exhausted, and I'm usually exhausted anyway, mentally. But it's nice. It's very good to see something at the end of all your hard work and to have a win and bring home a trophy. And of course, the children are absolutely delighted, and to see the smiles on their faces.
When would Roseanne like Nigel to retire?
When he wakes up one morning and says, "That's it, I've had enough." If he does it before then, it's not going to be the right time. It's got to be the right time for him.
Testing over, it's time for family Mansell to be away. Up and away. To another world. Home. The Isle of Man, set in the Irish Sea. A place of winds and legends. Fierce rocks and green hills. And the home of a British champion. A house called Ballaman. Nigel, with Roseanne and their children, have lived on the island for nearly a decade. It was here they started their family. Ballaman is the final family seat. Private and secluded from the outside world, their home has an atmosphere like a small village. Everything is natural stone and handcrafted, in keeping with the native beauty of the island. There are, however, some extraordinary things that are around the house which give identity to its owners. There is, for instance, a 4-hole golf course, the fastest golf cart in Europe, and 3 golf-playing dogs who are all part of the Mansell family. It is here that the British driver can relax, enjoy his family, and his favorite game.
Hit the balls. I'll let you go and have a play in a minute. This is what life's all about. Doing nothing. Having a nice relaxing time. Trying to hit a silly little ball down a silly little hole. And 3 very faithful girls behind. Abby, Frisbee and Kizzy. Hey, you just pinched my ball. Shall we have a game then? Shall we have a game? Oh, sit, up, up, fetch. Fetch, Kizzy. We lived just over the hill there, and basically when we came to the Isle of Man, it was very difficult to find a property that would suffice for our needs. Because of the actual job and environment that we work and live in, I need space. I'm afraid I can't live on top of people like so many of my counterparts too. IE is a good example in Monte Carlo. Fabulous place that it may be, it just isn't for myself or family. So we'd obviously got a house in mind, what we'd like to build, but we didn't have the land to build it on, and it took about 2.5, 3 years to put basically a package of land together, which I'm proud that we have now. We've got quite a lot of coastline and a lot of land behind and in front of us, and therefore we're able then, and I must thank now the Isle of Man government and the planners back in 1985 and 84 that they granted us permission to build the house here. And I mean, you know, from the point of view of being here, and certainly on days like today, there's nowhere else in the world but one would want to be.
There are also a few cars in evidence, including a magnificent Ferrari or two for the kids.
Flat out, flat out. Not working at all now.
The children's toy version is just as temperamental as the real thing. Like father, like son, Leo has occasional excursions off course. Everything is pretty normal at Ballaman. Children at school or at home. Pets. Even time to invite friends for a picnic.
Yeah.
Contrary to appearances, the Red Arrows have not flown exclusively for Nigel's birthday barbecue, but intend to give an air display at nearby city of Douglas to celebrate the Isle of Man's famous TT races. The entire Mansell family turns out to cook. The Red Arrows are also shown around the premises.
This is the one of the last 328 GTSs ever to come off the production line, and needless to say, right-hand drive, and they'll never be made again. And as Tim said, I shouldn't have bothered. He thinks it's his company car, but this is a Ducati 906cc, bought for my son here, Leo, who's going to ride it, aren't you? Eh? What do you think of that, though? The Red Arrows, what can one say? I mean, a splendid bunch of characters, incredibly professional in their own right. I'm very pleased to say that I've flown with them on numerous times and had a great time, and some exploits I'd love to tell you about, but I can't do. Oh! Bob! That almost got 2 Red Arrows in one.
It's an interesting fact that Mansell is a dedicated pilot, flying not only helicopters, but also experiencing the RAF Hawk and the Harrier.
Oh!
Extensive business interests are very much a part of Nigel's home. Mansell's resources are extensive, as is his considerable work for charity, and the latest scheme to promote British driving talent to Formula One. This is Mansell's way of putting something back into the sport he loves so well. The 4 days of home are vanished. The British driver is back on the road again for the Grand Prix of France. How did he feel about leaving his family, particularly the children?
Well, now because they're old enough, I mean, I give them a nice little chat and explain things, and I actually give them things to do, chores to do, a little bit of extra pocket money, and tell Leo that he's a man of the household now, and Chloe's got to look after Mummy because Mummy's getting old now. And it's amazing when you can rationalise with a 7-year-old, but they play ball, and they've never known anything different. So it's probably very difficult for them for the first few days, but it's probably harder for me than it is for them.
The Grand Prix of France. Nigel was in searing form, on pole position. In the race, Mansell's Ferrari expired, once again due to gearbox problems. The British driver raged. Silverstone lay ahead, and Nigel was going to give this race his all. Only a Grand Prix driver may fully appreciate the significance of a fastest lap. In bygone days, the fastest lap during practice meant pole position. It also merited a World Championship point. Today, only the best starting position remains as reward for arguably the single most dangerous feat in Grand Prix driving. It is Mansell himself who remarked that if a member of the public were to accompany him on such a task, they would probably have a coronary arrest on the first corner. The driver himself is not free from stress on these occasions. The heart beats faster. The breathing becomes more labored. The adrenaline starts to surge. To drive on the razor edge of catastrophe requires deep mental and physical reserves from the driver. He must summon concentration, draw on skills of sight and memory, resolve these with the maximum performance of his vehicle, then throw caution to the wind and go for it. This was the moment all year Mansell had been waiting for. Outside, the track he knew better than any other in the world. He was in command of a superb chassis and in charge of the most powerful engine Ferrari could give him. It was now up to him. The brain snaps commands. The right foot feathers the throttle. The chassis wrestles with a huge gout of V12 power. Both struggle against each other as the speed builds and builds. The Ferrari engine wails its unique song. The wind tears at the suspension as curves are assaulted with smoothness. Mansell drives with delicacy, almost caressing the apex of a corner. His helmet looks fixed, despite the force of gravity. His breath must be controlled, assured, even, to complete a staggering lap of Silverstone. The fastest in recorded history. A display of sheer artistry. A dazzling 1 minute, 7.428 seconds. Proof of one of the most special laps in his career. Mansell was giving notice to all and sundry that he was on home ground, and this was the one race that was his. The pits buzz with excitement. Some 6 minutes later, another world opens for Nigel and his very special friend, the great white shark himself, Greg Norman. This chance to relax after setting the all-time Silverstone record. This is a friendly match to which we're all invited.
Bit of tuning up being done here. See, a lot of people just think they can come out and play golf, but really they just got to tune the shoes up before we even do anything.
How's how you get that extra distance?
Extra 50 yards. If anything this afternoon, you'll learn a bit of bullshit.
Norman and Mansell make the most of a delightful occasion. Bets are made, forfeits taken, and then Nigel takes a hole off Greg. A moment of irrepressible joy. Norman smiles. He's seen it all before. Greg Norman can look after himself, as Nigel finds out, as if he didn't know already. Both champions have had bad luck in 1990. How do they cope?
Well, you learn to deal with, you become very resilient. And I believe that the negatives, and I don't think the negatives, people think the negatives, but the downside creates a stronger person, an individual out of yourself, because you're going to lose more than you can win. There's no question about it. You're not going to win every time you go out there and race or play golf. So if you can learn by your mistakes, and 9 times out of 10 it's beyond our control. If both of us screw up in our, like if he runs into the wall, if he made a mistake in a corner, he can justify that. But if somebody holds a shot against me, I've got no control of that. If the gearbox blows on him, he's got no control of that. All I can say is we go out there and give it our best shot every time, and as long as we have that attitude, we know we're going to be the best in the long run. Okay.
And that's the strength of every game.
Golf concluded, Captain Mansell pilots his guest back to the track for a barbecue beside the motorhome. On his way, he decides to show Greg the glories of the British countryside, especially the trees. The following day saw Silverstone playing to a full house. The 5,000 horsepower orchestra raises its voice. But who will conduct? The first laps will tell. Mansell waits to challenge in his own time and to make a rare mistake of over-enthusiasm, getting the corner all wrong. He would recover instantly to dog Senna once again at the same corner. Senna and Mansell are locked in combat. The Ferrari and its driver look in total command. Mansell is driving for Queen and country. This is the race he has to win. Then, the Ferrari falters and drops back. Prost passes to take up the lead. Mansell slows. On the straight at maximum speed, the electronic gearbox changes from 7th to 4th on its own. A most dangerous situation. A signal to the complete disintegration of the transmission, which follows almost immediately. The engine bellows one more time, as if in protest. Nigel turns onto the grass to park it. The British driver has given his all. He was fastest. This must have torn something deep inside the British champion. There is a finality here. First, the gloves, then the balaclava. His face wears a look of utter depression. Roseanne is with him. She is quite overcome with the situation. Within the hour, Nigel Mansell calls a press conference to announce to the world a very special statement.
It's not. It's just that the timing is perfect. It's a British Grand Prix, and it does make me very sad, but I'm announcing my retirement today.
Retirement? The journalists were rooted to the spot. These few words would trigger violent repercussions throughout the motor racing world. To be sure, Mansell had a contract with Scuderia Ferrari. He had the balance of the season to finish. But to retire at the height of his powers, impossible. Had 10 years of unremitting work been seen to fail? Would the World Championship never be his? So, with retirement at hand, perhaps it is appropriate to have Nigel's professional views on some very important subjects. Nigel Mansell flourished in an age of interesting driving talent. Easily the most flamboyant ace was Brazilian Nelson Piquet. Piquet was a world champion at Mansell's expense. Nelson was very gifted, but not always gracious, on or off the track. This was a mistake he would come to regret, not once, but many times. 3 outstanding talents remain Mansell's strongest competition. 3 times world champion Alain Prost. It is a measure of Prost's skill that Mansell thought him the only driver on the track that could teach him anything.
Alan is a complete and very masterful driver. I've learned, from the point of view of driving the car, I've learned absolutely nothing. From the point of view of positioning oneself in the team very quickly and getting people around oneself is a very good tactician from that point of view. I guess being unlike, if you like, the Nelson Piquets of the world, and even Ayrton Senna's of the world, which are, you know, they've been very quick and still are very quick drivers, and both world champions, ex-world champions. Alan, I think, is the most liked of all of them because of his professionalism.
Of the younger drivers, Austrian Gerhard Berger is in constant contact with Mansell. He is not afraid to match wits and courage with the British driver. But Berger could be overexcited and sometimes too brave.
I certainly found that last year, that instead of concentrating on what he's doing, you'll look over his shoulder and see what his teammate's doing. And I think that's the worst thing you can do at times. You should always get on with your own job first and then just keep a casting eye on your teammate just to make sure that you haven't gone down the wrong avenue. But I mean, Gerhard for me is a very quick driver, and he's taken a little bit of settling down after his monumental accident of last year at Imola.
The last of Mansell's most important opponents is Ayrton Senna, a driver of singular ability. Senna is almost mystical. His talents have a formidable repertoire, capable of perfect starts, endless fastest laps, driving incredibly accurately on full tanks or even exhausted tires, overtaking back markers. He is almost invincible.
I would say Senna is an exceedingly quick driver, and I would say that he is among 1 or 2 or 3 drivers presently in Formula One. It's just that where he's different from a few of others is that, again, he has got himself into a situation where he has the utmost backing of the best manufacturer from the point of view of engines in the world currently. And I'll say this now, everything being equal, he should be the 1990 world champion without any problem.
Accidents are an occupational hazard of the racing driver.
The whole essence of driving cars as fast as one possibly can means that, you know, occasionally, depending on the circuits, and some of the circuits we drive on are very dusty at times, I don't think anyone goes through the year which doesn't have a spin or accident or crashes the car. I mean, you just hope that you don't have any big accidents, that you don't actually get hurt. But, you know, sometimes you can have accidents through no fault of your own.
The possibility of accidents is always in the back of a racing driver's mind. So, too, is stress.
Yeah, I think what people don't appreciate is the amount of level of the stress that one has to put up with. And there's nothing like getting a win underneath your belt or getting a load of points in your pocket. And it's like anything else. The more success that you have, and more points or scoring that you can sort of accumulate, the higher stress or the same amount of stress won't cause you so much heartache. But I mean, with the few problems I've incurred this year already and the disappointments, I wouldn't say the stress is any more. It's just that it's a little bit harder to deal with because I haven't had the satisfaction that I should have got.
How is Nigel physically affected by tension?
It's common knowledge that the heart rate goes up as soon as you step into the race car. It probably goes from 80 to about 100, 120 even. And then it's actually been documented for the first hour of any Grand Prix. Most drivers' heart rate can be certainly as high as 175, and it probably doesn't come down below 145 for the first hour. So, I mean, drivers work quite, you know, hard.
What does Nigel do at the start of a spin? Shut his eyes?
They had to be open, because if not, then you'd have quite a monumental accident. I mean, we went into that spin at 195, and I think I only took off the throttle when it started to initially spin. And then halfway round, before it had even spun 60 degrees, I'd changed down 2 gears and floored the throttle again, because I had to make sure that when it spun backwards, that it didn't just go straight across the track into the wall. So I had to accelerate and turn the wheels again to make sure I kept the momentum in the spin. And my peripheral vision, which was quite extraordinary for me then, I knew exactly where I was on the circuit, exactly what distance I was from everything. And, I mean, the astonishing thing, and it might sound a little bit blasé, but it wasn't that big a moment, because I was in total control all the time. Okay, I'm not saying I went into the spin deliberately, because that's a nonsense. But what I'm saying is that once I entered the spin and knew the car was going to spin on me, I was in control of the situation then and was just waiting to come out of it ready to go. And as the film depicts, as soon as the car was straight, I was already in the right gear and I was gone and away. And then the following lap we actually set a new track record, which again just shows that I hadn't sort of damaged the tyres. Everyone has personal limitations. It's whether one wants to admit to them or not. And if you can admit to them and drive within them, then I think that's what makes you a solid and good driver. I think what makes a interesting driver, but a dangerous one, is one that doesn't admit to any limits at all and just pushes everything.
Without words, Nigel can be extremely expressive in a racing car, leaving no doubt as to his feelings. He is also very adept at putting on the pressure.
Even showing your nose when there's no chance at all of actually passing. But what you do, you just, even if they keep, just get the slightest glance of a car, the inside or outside, it just distracts them a little bit. And what you've got to do is try and, just try and get them off guard a little bit. And if you can do that, then when the chance arises, you might just be able to pull it off. The hardest people to pass are the most competitive ones. I think it goes without saying, again, this is on record. I mean, last year I was the only driver in Formula One to ever pass Ayrton in a race. And I did it, I think I did it in a few races, in 2 or 3 races. But I was the only driver in the whole season to manage it. I mean, that's a bit incredible, really, when you think about it. But, I mean, Ayrton is very, very difficult to pass. Alan, when he's fighting, can be equally difficult. Gerhard can be very tough. With certain drivers, you don't have a problem getting past as long as they know who you are, where you are, and you have respect for one another. For Alan and myself, there's no problem. For Gerhard and I, even with what happened at Imola, there's no problem. Patrese and myself are very good. Ayrton's a bit difficult at times because he'll go for anything, but I mean, we've done it and pulled it off. But there's a few others that, I suppose, if one's being honest, I mean, they're close to suicidal. I mean, you've got to be very careful.
A final question for Nigel. What quality does he most admire in a driver?
I think honesty. I think I admire that not only as a driver, but as a human being, as a man. You see, I believe that if you can have a conversation with anybody, whether you know them or not, and they are honest and respectful, you can communicate and the world would be a lot better place, because everybody would know where they are immediately, instead of thinking, well, is that right? Not quite sure. Does he really mean that? And for me, it's caused me a lot of problems in the past. I've got no problems admitting to it, but I'm too honest and I'm too straight. And people like you for it, or they hate you for it. As I said earlier, that's why Colin Chapman and I got on tremendously. We knew exactly where we stood with one another, and it was a harmonious relationship. I'm sure of this one fact, that if Colin hadn't have departed, I'd have won a World Championship by now.
Some months later, after his retirement statement at Silverstone, Mansell was at his holiday home in Portugal. In the self-imposed twilight of his career, no amount of golf, friends, or family could take his mind away from the waves of speculation that surrounded the end of a motor racing legend. Nigel was utterly unprepared for the international interest in his every action.
Go on, go on.
His fans were filled with sympathy and concern. His office was inundated by tempting offers from a dozen motor racing sources. His own honesty protested as to the significance of the most important decision in his life. Nigel was a troubled man, and it showed.
We're away from everything here, and we're at our place down in the Algarve. You'll see on some of the filming the beauty of this, and I say to myself sometimes, why do I need the hassle, and how long is a piece of string? I mean, how much money does anybody really need in the world to live and everything? And I can probably say that I'm not rich, but I'm certainly not poor. It's a constant fight, shall we say, within oneself as to try and control the desire to do what one loves doing the best, which is driving. We will just have to wait and see. As I'm waiting to see, I'm giving myself breathing space. The problem I have presently is that if people won't offer me things, I don't have anything to consider. And therefore, my decision of retirement is one of total happiness. But the problem I've got is that people and teams and manufacturers don't wish me to retire, and they are putting, shall we say, inducements, enticements, and basically a blank sheet of paper, not financially necessarily, but of how I want to go racing in the future, if I was to consider. And when manufacturers and teams are prepared to do that, then you have to ask the question, you know, are you really going away from racing for the right reason? Are you really retiring for the right reason? I think what is very special about doing a video and doing an insight to our life is the fact that I can actually perhaps get across to you, the viewer, and to the public, that it's not sort of night and day, and it's not black and white. There's an awful lot of grey area in all sports, and in our sport there's a tremendous amount of grey area. But I think the thing that I would like to tell you very personally is that I don't make decisions totally on my own. I have one very significant and very important person always in my background, and that of course is my wife, Roseanne. And if I do anything else in the future, or reconsider, or readjust my position, it is always with her backing and with great discussion. And not only do I, if you like, consider my wife, sometimes with certain things we also chat to our children, especially my daughter now, who's 8, and I never realised how grown up an 8-year-old can be. And of course I have 2 sons also. So there's an awful lot to be considered, and I would like to sow one thought in people's minds out there, is that everybody's very quick to jump up and judge a race car driver and what he might or might not do. And I'd like to say to you this, is that we are basically sportsmen and athletes in our own right, with one exception, that when we drive and when we compete and when we race, there's a potential danger and a disaster around the corner. And in blunt terms, at any one time we step into a Formula 1 car, we can lose our life. Now, that's not saying that it frightens me, my sport, but it's something to be considered. And therefore, I'll say this as well, that the papers and especially the tabloids are very keen to say how much we earn, or this, that, and the other. And I think it's grossly unfair with many people that they speak about, because there isn't a race car driver in the world that doesn't deserve every penny he gets.
The Mansells returned to Ballaman, there to exchange and touch all that was precious to them. It was clear to all concerned, the most difficult task in Mansell's life would be to retire. Some few weeks later, on the 1st of October, the British driver Nigel Mansell fired a rocket into the world of Formula 1.
That's it, put your finger on mine. Pull it back, ready, steady, go! Oh!
Mere hours out of the driving seat, after a fine second place in Spain, a tired Nigel confirmed the news the fans most wanted to hear.
You know, Monday, today, which is the 1st of October, an agreement was signed somewhere around about 11 o'clock. Throughout the world, the press, the fans, the manufacturers, even the teams and some of the other drivers were extremely opposed to our decision to retire. And everybody felt that it was premature, with the exception of Rosanna and myself, that was. And it's basically, in one word, things changed very rapidly in Formula One, and at the time we had decided to retire, and even a month or so after. It was exactly the correct thing to do, and up until really 10 o'clock this morning, and I would like to say that again, we were still undecided, but Williams have convinced me, Frank Williams and Patrick Head and Sheridan Thin has convinced me that, you know, we won't be competing next year just for the sake of competing. They've assured me we'll be competing for the World Championship. And with the provisions which are, they've given freely, and some which we've covered in the contract, now I am totally happy and confident that I'm never going to have to be looking over my shoulder as to what everyone will or will not be doing. And that's to say that everybody, but everybody from the mechanic upwards, and any person in the factory, anybody to do, and the sponsors and manufacturers to do with Williams, will be going for that one goal, and that's the goal that I haven't accomplished yet, which is trying to become the world champion.
It was departure time from Scuderia Ferrari. How would Nigel leave the prancing horse?
And it's been an unbelievable experience. I mean, I'm a bigger person, stronger person, more worldly than I certainly was when I joined him 2 years ago. And the team, no regrets. I mean, what a sensational 2 years I've had. Very exciting times, 3 victories to date with them. Just amazing the way of workings, the inner workings and the inner sanctum of Ferrari and the mystique of it. And one would need probably 10 years to explain that, if you're lucky. Extremely happy to have survived the Ferrari experience. And I'm so proud, so privileged to have been with them, been driving for them, to have won for them, and to actually be able to leave them with the support and the measure of support I still have in Italy, and to still go forward and rejoin my old team, the Williams team with Frank, and be able to hold my head up high knowing that I've got immense support and fans and friends, which is very, very important, and above all, to leave them on good terms.
Mansell gave the world a taste of the season to come, a superb place in Australia. His last race with Ferrari. There only remains one last experience, an opportunity to watch the champion at work, mastering a unique car.
We're sitting in one of the most special cars actually in the world, which is a production F40, which will do in excess of 200 miles an hour, in fact over 210 miles an hour, and is one of the most famous cars that Ferrari have ever produced. You've got to treat this car with the utmost respect because it has so much power, as we'll demonstrate. It will do over 200 miles an hour very easily and very comfortably. I think the passenger should drive, never be a passenger in an F40. We're just going to do a lap now of the Ferrari circuit. You can see with the acceleration of the car, it's, and this is in wet conditions. If it was a lot drier, we would be able to put the power down a lot easier. You've got to be a little bit careful today. Into the sequence of lefts and rights. This is an exciting bend in the dry. You put a lot of G-force around that one. And then again round another left-hand bend. This corner's rather slippy. Just give you an idea of speed. In the dry, you'd be going around the corners at twice the speed. Another little bit of wheel spin. And braking quite hard. And now we'll be accelerating down the straight. Going quite quickly at this point here. Oh, having a job to stop for this corner. That was quite quick into that corner.
and then a nice sedate drive back to the pits. What I love about my sport best is when the red light turns to green